So we're going to talk about Klimt's use of media handling, then we're going to talk about his use of his style, and then his use of colour. And you're going to make some notes and all these things, and then you're going to write those notes up in the sheet I provide in the assignment. And I want you to write three comments about each of the things I talk about. And fleshed out comments, the sort of thing you'd write in an exam answer. Okay, so not in note form, but fully formed, three comments, three sentences. Well, each comment could be more than one sentence, but about each of the things I talk about. And I'll give you some ideas, you make some notes, and then you can put them into fully formed comments. So the first thing to talk about is Klimt's use of media handling, and here the big thing is the use of gold and silver and platinum. And this is part of his gold period, and it was heavily inspired by the Byzantine Empire, the art that came from that, which is the kind of empire that happened after the Roman Empire, Europe, towards Eastern Europe. And some of the religious art from there is lots of gold mosaics. So we think of Byzantine, we think of gold, and that's what inspired him. In fact, in 1903 he went on a trip to Ravenna in Italy, and he, that's apparently a big inspiration for him. He started using those ideas in his own work. So all this use of gold would have this impact as you walk in and see this gigantic painting. It's gold and silver and platinum. It's all reflecting at you. It's shining and bright, and this idea that it's almost a religious experience. The gold was gold leaf that he applied, and that's very, 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 very thin, delicate sheets of gold that you'd have to put your adhesive down and then very gently lay that down, and so it doesn't crack, and it's a delicate process. It's actually a much more considered part of craft than art. If art is painting and making sculpture, and craft is creating a little bit closer to design, decorating things as well, then that's where gold leaf comes from, and that shows you that he was mixing these ideas up in his work. So that's something to say about use of that use of media. Another thing to say about Gustav Klimt's use of media is the way he paints in the flesh in these things. This is the best quality image detail I could find of this part of the painting, and it still isn't quite good enough, and I think you might be able to see better ones online. But you can kind of see that the flesh is made up of lots of dabs of lots of different colours. So, warmer colours like oranges and pinks and yellows, and then you can see blues and greens in there as well. So quite a sort of impressionistic and post-impressionistic, obviously influenced way of building up the flesh tones. And Klimt apparently was, worked in a very, very intricate, painstaking way. It would take him a long time to do these things. They're wildly expressive paintings, but it's not an energetic style necessarily. He's worked over these, laboured over these. You can see all tiny details in the flowers and the hair and everything. So there's a big build up and lots of painstaking brushstrokes to do that. And there, anyway, you can see how that's done in the flesh and the colour, but also the tiny details in the hair. The other thing to say about Gustav Klimt's use of materials, or his use of media, is that as well as painting, he draws. There's lots of drawing, so there's like a really, really nice fine use of line that you could elaborate on if you talk about line as well. So his use of gold, his building up the flesh tones with these layers of different colours, a bit like impressionist or post-impressionistic sort of way, and all his tiny intricate mark making and the details with the flowers and into the pattern. There's a lot of intricacy in the way he works. These are three things to say about Gustav Klimt's use of media. Gustav Klimt's style, there's two things mainly to say about that, and that he was an Art Nouveau painter. And some of you might remember about Art Nouveau is that it is inspired by nature and the curving, elegant, flowing lines of nature and the whiplash curves are important in Art Nouveau. Um, but it's also a bit edgy. It's also refers to kind of magically ideas and sort of spiritual ideas that a lot of them come into this as well. One of the inspirations for Art Nouveau was medieval ideas and cultures that had come before, ones that are lost to us now, um, distant and magically seeming ones. And Gustav Klimt does that in this as well with his recalling of the Byzantine art. So Art Nouveau for sure. It's an Art Nouveau style as well. The impact of nature in here is very strong as well. So Art Nouveau, and also symbolist. You could also say symbolist, because obviously symbolism. When we talk about pattern, we'll talk about this a little bit more. But even just looking at this up close of the head, we've got. We spoke before about the figure that the archetypal man, the archetypal woman, the archetypal couple in love. Um, so that's quite symbolic. The man being the strong sort of with all the male characteristics related to the sun, and him being the beautiful, mysterious one related to the moon. So all that kind of symbolism, and we can see as well, the man's got the classical looking, uh, the vines or the leaves in the hair. It's not quite a laurel wreath or anything like that, but it does remind us of classical kind of religious gods and things, Greek and Roman gods. Um, so anyway, yeah, there's a lot of symbolism in here. So he's also a symbolist painter. So that's two things you can say about his style. And the last thing is his use of colour. And obviously the theme is gold and yellow in here. And what do we think of that colour? And we'll come back to the gold and yellow in a second. Um, because I forgot to put this slide in, so sorry. But still talking about colour, and we're talking about, this. A part of the idea of this painting is this kind of optimism, this joy, this happiness, this blooming and blossoming of a new relationship, and this is represented in colour. Obviously, he uses all these bright colours in this grass verge. Here's a wee detail of it, and what we can see are lots of bright primary and secondary colours. Okay, nothing in here is very muted, so it's very bright. So that's optimistic and happy, and also some energy here. And the energy comes from the use of contrasting colours. Contrasting colours happening in here. So you can see the touches of red amongst the green, but towards the front we have these purple or violet and yellow flowers. So colour contrast, bright primary secondary colours gives us optimism, and adds that to the painting. And I think to talk about his use of colour, I think it's what like the gold and yellow, like I was saying the gold. Now the gold is gold a colour, it reflects other things. Is it more of a surface, a texture? But if we're talking strictly about colour, then yellow is this warm, happy, positive colour that dominates this picture and surrounds the couple as well. So that's a comment worth saying in itself. There's a lot I'm sure you could continue to talk about with what yellow means and what it brings to the painting. But it's an optimistic colour. It's the colour of light. Um, it is, if blue is towards the colour of darkness, yellow is one of these colours that it's a colour but it signifies light. And it is warm, positive. There's another thing to say about colour, and another thing to say about his use of colour is, I think, how pale the people are in comparison to everything else. And it almost separates them from the surroundings, and it does, it is quite surreal. I suppose you could also say that about his style. It's quite surreal, um, because we can tell, it's not a real robe. These aren't real clothes. They suddenly look flat, and we get this strange idea of space. Um, but anyway, sorry. The fact that the people are so pale with that sitting on top of, it does. I think it makes it seem quite sort of strange. Um, Sort of separates them a little bit from the surroundings. I think it makes the surroundings more intense. Is what it does. Yeah, the pale colours and the people, the surroundings, almost like take over them. do what they're supposed to do, surround them and enrobe them and you know, overwhelm them. So if that rambling nonsense makes sense to you, that's some ideas about colour. So if you could now take these what I've said and turn it into some, and you've written your notes, so turn it into some comments and stick them into your sheet. That would be terrific. 3 for each. 3 for media handling, 3 for style, and 3 for colour, please. And I look forward to reading them, and I'll get feedback to you. Thank you.